Hey, good morning, everybody. I'm Ryan with Propelio. Today we've got one of my favorite people in the real estate world, Mac Lawson. Thanks for coming in.
Oh man, thanks for having me.
Love
the place.
One of my earliest interactions with Mac was several years ago, and his commentary was basically the whole, all I want to do is make people rich so I can have somebody to drink beer with.
Yeah, exactly.
So how's that working for you?
It's going pretty well, it's like when you don't have a curfew,
Yeah.
If you're the only one that doesn't have a curfew, there's really nobody else to hang out with. So I'm looking for people to hang out with.
Because everybody, all your friends or whatever, they have real jobs, and you're like, I don't want to work today. I want to have a beer.
They work a lot. And, I had some goals for my life that I just didn't include doing that all the time.
Like the 9 to, well, everybody says 9 to 5, but I think that's a 30-year-old, because if you work, it's more like a 8 to 10.
Well,
like in a corporate type thing.
Let's not get it twisted. I had years and years of being a cog in a wheel.
Uh-huh.
So, and I try and impart that to my kids as well, is that, what you see now isn't necessarily the way it's always been. I worked at Fidelity Investments for 10 years, and I clocked in and I clocked out and worked overtime and did it for very little pay.
Right.
But it develops work ethic through doing something like that to determine what you don't want.
Right, because you can never look at anybody and go, you can't look at the end result and say, yeah, I just want to do that to tomorrow.
Well, a lot of people do that. They kind of look at where you are now, and just with my kids, I try and impart that to them. Like, hey, listen, because I do have time to go do things and all these other things, but it took years and years of really hard work to kind of get to the point where I can not work as hard.
So let's get into that. So you had 10 years of being the cog and with a very little pay. What was the transition to go from that aspect to go, let's go towards more of a, what was the spark to say, screw this, I want to have a life?
Well, after 10 years of doing it, I just kind of grew up thinking that the stocks and the bonds and the licenses and all that thing was just kind of the way to go. And after 10 years of doing it, I just felt like a dealer in a casino.
Right.
Good hand, bad hand. Looks like you made some money here, you lost some money there. Never in control of anything, just a matter of kind of along for the ride. And I knew more than 95% of the people in the United States about stocks and about trading and everything else, and still didn't know anything.
Right.
Still didn't have any control over it. Didn't have. It was just, people that are super educated on it still don't have a clue.
Kind of like Bitcoin. Exactly. Silence.
Yes. No, I've been through a couple of Bitcoin type of scenarios in my life. With the stock, with the internet bubble, and also real estate bubble in 2008. I had to kind of shift my focus at that time as well. But so I ended up leaving Fidelity Investments, and I took about an 80% pay cut. So I went to work for a guy, and he put together land partnerships.
Okay.
So we would raise capital. We would buy 300 to 500 acres at a time.
So when you say you would take an 80% pay cut, so you left your 10-year career to go work for him, or work for him like as a partnership?
Work for him.
So you were still getting a paycheck?
Work for him.
But you were learning?
My paycheck was 80% less than it was the year before.
Right.
But what I did was I followed him around and I listened to him have conversations with other people. And over the course of that year, I began participating in the conversations.
There you go.
And at the end of the year, I was the one having the conversations without him. And so it was a year of really just following somebody around that was successful, watching what he did, watching how he interacted with people, watching the cues that you would get from other people in regards to raising money. I was there for 10 years.
With him?
Yeah.
So you did 10 years Fidelity, 10 years with him as an employee.
Yes.
But when you're an employee, were you able to participate on the deal as well, or are you still just kind of like in that, using it as almost like a master's program where you're learning the industry?
Well, with the land company, it was called AVEX, was the name of our company, and I was able to participate, and I earned an equity ownership of the company, but I was always just kind of along for the ride. I was in the back seat. There was somebody else driving the car.
Right.
The car went wherever he wanted to go, and and then 2008 came along, 2009 came along, and I was paid to raise money and sell stuff.
Right.
And I was paid very well to do that. And in the years previous, we had been doing a lot of it.
So,
but in 2008,
yeah,
it didn't happen as much.
So I've never, full disclosure, I've never participated in a land deal before. I've done the single family, I've gotten close to some other bigger projects, but it's always been the single family, either wholesaling or flipping or that kind of world. I hear land deals, and I'm sure people in the comments below are going to go, I think money. Because I know Daniel was like this close to having a land deal where there was millions and millions on the table. So when you say land deals, I'm thinking millions and millions. Am I in the right mind there? Or
You're absolutely thinking right.
Okay.
Yeah, our land was, our average acquisition was probably $8 million to $10 million. We ended up buying over the course of 10 years, $500 million in equity that we had. We bought it without debt. So my pitch at the time, I would go out to California and raise money for land in Prosper, Salina, places that you've never heard of until recently. But we were out there in 1999, 2000.
Pennies on the dollar, right?
We bought 1,700 acres in Prosper. So we owned both sides of the tollway for a mile in Prosper. And, today that's probably worth, hundreds of millions, 100 million, 150 million. But through that experience, the one real thing that I gained from that was the ability to ask for money.
Right.
And the ability to ask for big money. Those transactions just got me normalized with like, oh, it's a $2 million check, it's a $4 million check, and this is just something that we do all the time.
Well, I know even in the single family, just working with people, one of the first rules you have to detach yourself from is when you're looking at a house, do not put your mindset on the house. Do not think about what your lifestyle is, because if you walk into a $20,000 teardown, that might be somebody's livelihood. Versus on your side, and then on vice versa, you walk into a $10 million home, but you're used to a $200,000 home. You can't be like, oh my God. So it sounds like there's a similarity there where when I'm asking for somebody's money, whether I'm asking for $20 or $20 million, you probably need to be it's no big deal.
Right, and that's just through practice.
Right.
I got the opportunity through that time in my life to be able to, handle that kind of money, and
develop
so that just
skill,
just made me where it's just it's just an extra zero on there at the end, and that's what people do.
Well, I know Will Crozier, shout out to Will, he was in here maybe a month or two ago, and one of his thing is just add a zero. What you're doing today is the same thing I'm doing today, and the only difference is I added a zero. And with that, you're adding, an enormous amount of profit. So for you and your story, 10 years Fidelity, 10 years in this company. 08, you were alluding to something, and then I kind of cut you off.
Well, part of that as well, I just need to give a shout out to one of my mentors out in California. He's in San Jose. Unbelievable guy. Charles Davidson is his name.
Okay.
Hey,
Charles.
Never invested in stocks, never invested in tech, but gave away $16.5 million. And that's the guy that I spent 5 years with, watching him do what he did. And it just, that's what you got to do. You got to be around people that are doing it,
Right. And that's another thing. It's not a us thing. It's not a Daniel thing. It's a thing. I forgot who came up with it. Is surround yourself with the people you want to be versus if you're always around hood rats, you're going to be a hood rat. If you're around successful people, well, chances are you're going to become successful.
Well, what I got from him was kindness. I got not bullying. He was not a bully. He was very kind. He was always worried about what's going to happen with everybody else that I'm involved with. He made millions of people.
That's cool.
Not made millions. He made tens of people millionaires. Everybody around him was a millionaire. And so anyway.
What's his number?
Anyway, he doesn't take a lot of calls.
Yeah,
you got to kind of.
But you know what? That's so cool because in the real estate world, there's so many just giant personalities and giant egos, and whether they're warranted or not, it's just like, a lot of times people are just assholes. So that's why I really like hanging out with you, or really knowing you personally, is just the fact that you're not. A quick side story is he found a random band guy on I don't know what website it was, but it was like a GoFundMe account where you could basically buy this musician to have a garage concert. And Mac's like, you know what? I'm going to invite everybody out to my ranch, and he got a Greyhound bus and drove everybody from Dallas to this ranch, and we had a great time. I even brought my father to that, and it was a really cool, you got it catered and everything. So
Drew Kennedy is his name.
Drew Kennedy, shout out to him.
Yeah.
So again, that's going back to what I first alluded to, which is hey, I just want to hang out and drink beer. So,
well, I had to prepare myself in lots of ways for that, and things were not going as I planned, because I really expected to spend the rest of my life inland, in Prosper and Salina, and I still think it's a great thing to do, but I was ultimately still an employee. I had an equity ownership,
Right.
but I was still an employee. And the owner of the company was doing fine. I was not doing fine, because I was paid for transactions.
You were married to the transaction. There was no cash.
And I got paid very well to do the transactions, but the transactions stopped.
Right.
2008, 2009. So I had to kind of go to plan B. And my plan B was essentially a late night real estate class.
It was on VHS.
I laugh about it, but I went to, it's not a late night real estate class, but I went to Lifestyles. And I went there during the snowstorm of 2010. I don't know if you remember, we got 14 inches of snow here. So I went out to Lifestyles. I was one of 3 people in the thing. They were trying to sell me this thing, and I was like, I don't even know what this is, but sure, let me do it. So I went to Lifestyles, and this is really, I got to give a lot of credit to Lifestyles. This is really what got me going, because they go, well, you can buy a house with $10,000 out of pocket. On that house, you can get $300 to $350 a month in cash flow after everything. And, how many of those do you need to not have to go to work? And so I was like, wow, that's really not that much. I mean,
well, what's funny is we literally just had a show yesterday with Grant Kemp. I don't know if you ever met him over at 1795. He officed over there, and literally he was like, we just backed in. How much do you want per month when you retire? Then did an inflation calculator, and like, this is how many houses you need to buy every single year for the next X amount of years to retire.
Yeah, I think my inflation calculator is the price of rent, because in my opinion, that's what inflation is.
Right.
Is how much it costs to live,
Yeah.
And so it's an inflation adjusted, amount. And also on top of that, you get tax free. I mean, you can do it for essentially tax free. So, I went to this class, and they said $350, $400 a month, something like that. I said, well, if I had 20 of those, I would be getting $8,000 a month. I could pay my rent. I could, pay for my house. I could pay for a lot of stuff with that. And I wouldn't have to be dependent upon the next transaction. Like, when's the next transaction going to close?
Right.
I said, that will allow me to focus on other things.
Well, before we get too far into your Lifestyles journey, I do want to ask everybody, if you're watching, please like us, please give us a share. Typically, I know Daniel helps us out with a lot of shares, but I think he's in Facebook jail right now. So help us out with those shares. We really appreciate it. So, and also shout out to Lifestyles, because I know a lot of the people that have come through here, several of them have participated in Lifestyles, and I know they're real big on the cash flow. They're real big on develop that portfolio. So, but that, in my mind, I'm thinking land deals that's the end goal. And it's almost like you were at the end goal and going back to stage one.
Well, that's a very interesting point. And what happened was that a lot of people at Lifestyles were trying to get in the position that I was leaving. It was a matter of, I had 375 limited partners. I say I. I mean, it's not fair to say
group.
I,
right?
Because it wasn't I. And you need to be honest with yourself about what is I and what is not I.
Yeah.
Because when things really kind of got bad in the markets and such, we were doing okay. but I was not doing okay.
Right.
And so I needed to focus on I. And that's how through that lifestyles thing, I said, well, you know, hey, if I can just get 20 houses, if I can get a set amount of income every month, then it'll allow me to go do what I want to do. So ultimately, that's what I did. I went out there and I said, 20 houses, if I have to put up $10,000 a house, that's $200,000. I've got equity in my house, the house that I lived in, I've got equity in my house, I've got an IRA. If I believe in this, then I'll sell my IRA, I'll leverage my house, I'll get everything out, because at the end of this, I'll have $8,000 a month. I mean, if I really believe this, and I really believed it. I went and bought my first house in Cedar Hill, and I intentionally did it far from where I worked. I worked in Frisco. I bought a house in Cedar Hill.
Is it just to force you to drive, or just
because I didn't want to go over there? I didn't want to go to the house, and I didn't want to be like the guy who's like with a Swiffer mop, you know, mopping stuff.
You wanted to make sure it was an investment versus a hobby.
And my training also to date with the raising capital and having limited partners was to not put yourself in that position. I couldn't, you know, our largest land deal that we did was 27,000 acres. I never saw the 27,000 acres. I mean, you can't do it.
Right.
So I learned there are things that you can't do, and you just have to, trust the process. So with the houses from the very beginning, what I did was I set it up as a business. So if I can buy a house, and if I can have somebody rehab it, and if I can lease it out, and it all makes money, then I do it.
Right.
If I don't, if I can't afford to have somebody else do it, it doesn't make enough money to do it.
Because it's not worth your time.
It's not worth my time, especially because, you know, I was still getting a paycheck and I was still doing okay, but I just didn't have the big bumps of like large pieces of land selling and getting large, you know, chunks of cash in. So I couldn't risk my income there for a crappy little house in Cedar Hill.
Right.
So, you know, I went through and I got 3 bids. The first bid was a guy who called me back, said, $15,000. For what? To do the house. What does that mean?
Right.
Do it. You know, like, is that floors? Is that, is that washing, dishwasher? Is that new faucets? Is that, what is that? You know?
Right.
Oh, I'll take care of it. It's just $15,000. Okay. And so the second guy called me back, and it was a 1-page bid. It said floors, $5,000, kitchen, $3,000.
Itemized, yeah.
But what does that include? Does that include, what's it going to look like at the end of this? And then the third bid, and I'll give a shout out to Blake Johnson from Finishing Touches. I mean,
he's been here.
Everybody knows. I mean, a lot of people know Blake. But Blake came back with a 10-page bid. And his bid included light bulbs, it included light switches, it included water cutoff valves.
Everything.
It included everything that they're going to do to the entire house. And his bid was a parts list. So you sign the contract with him, he gives it to his guys bring a truck up, they unload everything that they need at one time into the garage, do the whole house. So in a 2-week period, 3-week period, bam, it was done. And my conversation with Blake Johnson from the very beginning was that, listen, I can't do this. I mean, the only way that I can do this is to have nothing to do with it. And so I'm going to expect you to do everything.
Yeah, and Blake is really good about that. Like, we've had him in here. He's a friend of the show. I've known him for several years now. And one of his biggest things is if you're doing the project yourself, you're no longer an investor, you're a rehabber. And you need to find strategic partnerships like that because they are your partner, because you trust that they're going to take care of you. Obviously, in this world, there are some GCs that aren't that good. And that's why you need to find the ones that are good. And Blake's one of the good ones.
Yeah.
Finishing Touches.
Well, trust and set expectations as well. Because with Blake, I said, Blake, I'm going to come here twice. I mean, the day you start, we're going to make a plan for it. And the day you tell me you're finished, I'm going to come back down here and I'm going to walk through the house. And if there's a Coke can on the floor, I'm not going to pick it up. I'm going to call you and say, there's a Coke can on the floor. You need to get somebody over here to pick it up. That is my expectation of how this has to go in order for me to do this. And if you do this for me, then I can do a bunch of these.
Right.
You know? And so,
but you started off with the one.
Just one.
Cedar Hill.
Yeah, just
as a
one.
test, because it sounded like you're still testing the lifestyles model, you're testing the GC model, and you're almost testing yourself. Can you do this?
Right, exactly. So, I've got some dates down here, but I went to Lifestyles in February of 2010.
Mm-hmm.
I bought that house in a month later.
That's just taking the action, because there's another thing. Because I've been to several of those lifestyle meetings, and I've been to a ton of the RIA type meetings, and I hate being the rah moto guy, but you have to just do it. Yeah, you just have to take action and actually just buy the damn house. So kudos to you for
that's
buying
what happened.
The damn house.
So I looked it up on. At the time you could just go on MLS and they were just everywhere. And
right.
They said buy a $50,000 house, put $15,000, $20,000 into it. It'll be worth $100,000 when it's finished.
Mm-hmm.
It'll lease for $1,000 a month. And so, I left my house, which was kind of a nice part of town. I drove down my block. This is 2010. Out of 15 houses on my block, there's 7 that are for sale. They've got for sale signs on all of them. I mean, rich people were having a hard time then. I mean, it was rough. I mean, I don't know if anybody remembers those days, but it was rough. So I drove down my block, 7 houses for sale. I drive all the way down to Cedar Hill. I go into this thing called the Woods. I don't know if you know where the Woods is. It's a gigantic Fox and Jacobs, 1980, 1978 development that they did. All the houses are exactly the same. There's 450 houses in this one subdivision. I drove up and down the streets and drove all the way around, and just to get comfortable with what is it that I'm getting ready to buy. I've never been to Cedar Hill before, and what is this thing I'm going to buy? So out of 450 houses, I saw 3 that were for sale. So a relationship of 3 to 450 versus 7 to 15.
Right.
I go, if these houses don't work, there would be a lot of them for sale. And then I drove around and there's 2 for lease out of 450, 2 for lease signs.
So
I go, 450 houses, there's 3 for sale and 2 for lease.
That means people are living in them.
People are living in it. Every single house is either owned by somebody else, owned by the people that live there, or owned as a rental.
So it just, anecdotally, you're like, well, something's working.
Yeah. I mean, how can it not work?
Mm-hmm.
And every house is exactly the same, kind of the lifestyle thing. They go, well, all the houses are the same. I mean, the kitchen's on this side on one, the kitchen's on the other side, but it's the same house.
Mm-hmm.
And if this house is worth $100,000, why is this house worth $40,000?
Right.
I don't know. I can't explain how easy it is. It's just a matter of that one's worth $100,000, this one's selling for $40,000, and it's going to cost me $15,000, $20,000 to get it to $100,000.
So back then, did you just start buying everything?
I bought 14 houses within about 6 months.
Mm-hmm. And for finances wise, were you still using you alluded to earlier, the whole buy it with $10,000, and are you using private money, are you using hard money, or did you just have a big old piggy bank?
No. What I did was I essentially borrowed money from my house. Mm-hmm. So I had about, I could borrow about $125,000 from equity in my house. And my house had gone up in value some, and the bank was willing to, refinance it or whatever. So I had a line of credit, so I would go out and buy 1, maybe 2 houses at a time on my line of credit. I would buy the house, I would fix one up, I would peel that off onto a bank line, to a bank, fixed bank debt.
Right.
And then the other one would be in the pipeline. I would be fixing that up and pulling that off of my line of credit. And at that time, I mean, it was really no money. I mean, $10,000 was being conservative.
So you alluded to earlier about how you wanted to run this like a business. Now, are you doing the paperwork? Are you doing all the refinancing and getting the loans, or did you find an assistant to help you out there? Because it sounds like you had the GC side of things, but a business side, you're going to have an acquisitions guy, you're going to have a office management person. Like, were you doing all that, or were you just like, man, I'm going to start farming this out early? You're laughing. I don't know.
I'm just trying to think back about it because
You've had a
I
beer
just
since
don't
then.
remember. I just don't remember it being that difficult.
Yeah.
I mean, I would buy a house. You know, here's a good example. So, that first house that I bought, that little house in Cedar Hill, I still own it. I leased it. I mean, I got it all fixed up. It got fixed up within 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. Put it on the market, and Lifestyles just said put an ad in the green sheets.
Mm-hmm.
So $1,000 a month, completely new, like new, 322 Cedar Hill schools, whatever it was, and I went on vacation, and I go, I'll probably get a couple calls next week. This will probably take a month to rent. I would imagine that's just been my experience with renting stuff. It's just like it takes a while to rent it. And so I went on vacation, and I went skiing, and I had my phone in my pocket, and I set up a Google phone number so that no one had my phone number.
Right.
And they would call a phone number and
Kind of like now.
send me a voicemail, and the voicemail would be an email. And so I'm sitting with my daughter going up the ski lift on Monday morning, and bing, my phone dings, and I look at it and go, I got a call on the house. 2 minutes later, bing. Got another call in the house. By the time I got to the top of the ski list, I think there was 4 calls.
Right.
In the course of a day and a half, I had 27 calls, 30 calls in 2 days on this place. And I go, wow, that wasn't what I expected, but it's a problem nonetheless. I mean, I'm not going to call. I don't want to call these 27 people back. I don't want to do this. So I called the realtor that sold me the house. It was a foreclosure or something, but it was on standard MLS. I called the realtor that sold the house, and I said, I've got this Google phone number that I'll give you the code for. You can go in there, listen to all the messages, have an open house, take applications, and can you do that for me? Yeah, no problem. How much would that be? A quarter of the first month's rent. So, wow, okay, $250?
You're like, done.
Like, here's my code, log in.
And here's the next 75 houses.
Yeah, here's the code, log into my thing. And so she had an open house. She took the application. She took the application fees. She scanned in the documents. I did a background check and accepted the second or third one. They moved in 2 weeks later, and I was just like, I'm blown away. I mean,
You're like, man, this real estate stuff is easy.
My expectations were, that there were going to be problems and stuff, but there were problems, but they were good problems.
But not to back up too far, because I'm sure people are watching right now going, well, shit, how'd you find the deal? But again, we're going back to 2010, where we're still in that recovery of the 2008 fiasco, where you could just throw a rock and find deals.
So I got a funny story about that. So I got a friend of mine called me. I had bought 4 or 5 houses, something like that, and kind of got out within my little group of friends or whatever. Oh, Mac's buying houses, and they go, oh, we don't know how to do that. Let's call him, So a buddy of mine called me and said, like, man, what are you doing? Like, you buying these houses and stuff? How do you find them or whatever? I go, just go into MLS and look at, something between $40,000 and $60,000. It needs to be 1,200 square feet at least, a 322, and bam, I did it on the phone with him. I go, pull up MLS, type this stuff in, bam. There's 150 houses that met that criteria. And I go, look at these things. I mean, any one of these, just throw a dart at one of them, as long as you have the ability to get it rehabbed.
Right.
I mean, you don't want to just be out there doing this. I mean, if you don't know what you're doing, but like with that check box, of like somebody who can do this for me. Blake can do it for me, and I trust that he can do it. I mean, there's no limit. I mean, it was just bam. I'll do as many as I can. I mean, it's more work for him, but that's what he wants. Is more work. So my buddy, so I see this list, and I go, take for example this third house here. I go, this is over kind of by Mesquite High School, and it's a 2,400 square foot house. 4 bedroom, I think, 3 bath, 3.5 bath, 2-story on like at least 1/4 of an acre for $33,000. And I go, well, shit. I mean, even if I had to spend $40,000 on it, $50,000, let's just put $50,000 on it, I'm in it for 80. It's on the tax rolls for 130. I go, that's a deal all day long. So I hung up with him. I said, oh, I got to go. Hung up with him.
Dinner's cooking.
Hung up with him, called the realtor on the house, went by and dropped off $1,000 deposit on it, went and looked at the house. Because I knew for a fact
It was a deal.
that this is a deal. I mean, no matter what happens, I can fix this house and I can get it, I can get it back to what I...
So my question though is you're on the phone with him, you're doing this. At this time, are you still working a full-time job?
Yeah.
Or did you already quit?
No, I was still working. I mean, that whole process of telling, the most time that I spent on it was telling my friend what I was doing. I mean, the explanation of what I was doing was way more time than I actually spent doing it. I mean, I would look on MLS, I'd have a list, I'd go kind of pick one.
The glory days.
Kind of pick one, like I was telling him on the phone, I was like, throw a dart.
Right.
Any one of these is going to be, it's going to be a great deal.
So moving forward though, it's like, you bought 14 in that first year, right?
Yeah.
What was the next step? Are you still doing the single families? Because I know you still do land though, right? Or are you not doing land at all?
Not really, no.
Okay.
No, that's just personally. I have some farm, I guess.
Okay.
Farmland that's just kind of recreational land now.
So are you still doing the buy and hold? Are you doing the flipping? Or how do we go from like 14 houses in a year to like the mysterious Mac Lawson we all hope to know now?
Well, it was, the first 14 houses were kind of like a proof of concept to a certain extent. So I went through the proof of concept that this really does work. And, I kind of took that and I went back to Lifestyles again, and they said, well, if you buy an apartment, you can buy them for $15,000 a door right now, and, you can get this income, and with financing, it's going to be it's better for you than houses.
Right.
And I go, well, what they said about houses was true.
Give it a go.
Exactly. I mean, I could have, my numbers were exactly what they said. And so I go, well, if they're right about this, maybe they're right about apartments. So I joined as a PIG member in July of 2010.
What's a PIG member?
It's just a preferred. It's
it's
usually
a Lifestyles like VIP type thing.
Yeah, if you're gonna just buy houses, then you're kind of like one member. But when you kind of go to the next level, I think it costs $12,000. No, it's like a one-time thing for $12,000. And with that, what I got was road trips to apartment complexes.
Okay.
And that's really what got me over the hump. So I could go out on these road trips. It was once a month on a Friday. We would go visit 10 or 15 apartment complexes, and we would talk to the owners, and the owners would tell us how much they bought it for, who they used for their financing, any work that they did on the interior. And through that same process, the same process that I've talked about over and over again, it's just being around the people that are already doing it, you know? And so I did that until April of 2011. So from July to April, I was looking at apartment complexes and thinking, this is kind of where I want to go.
This is what you want to do, but you haven't done it yet.
And I still had my job as well. So I still had a job at that point. And so I ended up buying a 61-unit apartment complex on Ferguson Road. It's kind of east White Rock Lake.
Okay.
It had been on LoopNet for a year and a half. Nobody wanted it. The bank that owned it was the third bank that had owned it. So the bank had taken over another bank, which had taken over another bank, and this loan was from 3 banks ago.
It was just like nobody wanted it.
Nobody wanted it.
Yeah.
Horribly managed. I paid $11,000 a unit for it, so it was $600,000. So this is when I really kind of brought my brother in as a business, and he put up half the money and I put up half the money. He had seen what I'd done with the 14 houses, And I said, this is the next step. You want to take this step with me or not? And so we each put in $300,000.
And was that cash or was that financed?
All cash.
Okay.
Because we were buying it from the bank. Nobody would finance it. So I had to buy it cash. And that's just the time in the market. I think Will, during his thing, was talking about this is what it was.
Right.
I mean, that's why you got it for $11,000 a door.
Yeah.
Got it super cheap. But it was horrible. I mean, it was horrible. It was drug dealers, prostitutes. I mean, they had units that had raw sewage in them, and they just didn't care. And I talked to the property manager on site, and I said, if we kept you on, what would you do differently? Nothing. This is a pretty good place, And I was like, oh man, that tells me all I need to know.
Bye.
So we got up the gumption to go out and buy this thing. And one of the reasons that really allowed me to do this was having looked at 15 other apartment complexes, the same scenario that I took from the houses of like all these other ones are worth 100 and this one's worth 40. Why?
Right.
It's just a discrepancy in the market. And so, we just decided to go in and really there was no downside. I looked at it. People were like, you're crazy to buy that. I mean, at the time they were like, you're crazy. I mean,
right.
That place is,
Well, you see drug dealers, you see prostitutes, you see sewage. Yeah, I mean.
That place is dangerous.
But I think most people that aren't in the real estate world, like if you're in the real estate world and you see or you smell cat piss and you see shit on the floor and you see a half a wall gone, you're like, I see money. But most people see, I don't want to be near that. So I could see where normal people would be like, you're crazy.
Yeah. So, we had a plan for this. And our plan was that we did our due diligence and we did our, here's another thing that was just crazy looking back at it. The first time I saw the apartment complex, ever actually stepped foot on it and viewed it, I owned it 27 days later. And I'd never owned an apartment complex in my life. So 27 days after the first day that I set foot on site, I was the owner.
So basically you took about, 7-8 months to learn all of that.
Absolutely.
And then you're like, once you had an idea of what you wanted to do with this and had a kind of a grasp on the business model, you came across the property and then you pulled the trigger.
Well, the other part of that and what I referred to back on the single family houses too was having Blake Johnson for doing those. I found a management team that was qualified to help me on this.
So did they come in and just kick everybody out, fix up everything, and then still take over the leasing and all that?
That's a great story. So this is leading up to this story, which is a fantastic story. But they own 640 units, a quarter mile away, right up the street. Really, they had a whole staff there. So they go, we can add 61 units, no problem. Our 640 units looked like that before, so we're not scared of it, especially because it's so small. And so they had connections with the police out there. And so what we did was, during our due diligence, we did a lease audit. And in our lease audit, it's just going through the lease files and making sure that there's a lease and there's somebody that's on that lease is in the right apartment complex. Right apartment and stuff. And we took all the Social Security numbers. So we wrote down every Social Security number, we put it on a spreadsheet, and we went to the police station. With our tenants' information, we gave it to the police and said, hey, listen, we're buying this apartment complex. We know you have a lot of problems over here. We know you have to show up every Saturday night. We're going to turn this thing around. We want your help. Here's the Social Security number of everybody that lives there or is associated with the people that live there. And so I bought it on Thursday, and Saturday night we had a police raid.
Yeah, I could see that.
So we had 8 police cars, 16 policemen.
Because they probably went through that and were like, ding.
There were
ding,
7 outstanding.
Ding.
There were 7 outstanding warrants, and we're not talking like traffic tickets. We're talking like pretty serious bodily harm.
Warranted warrants.
Drug dealing. Kinds of things like that. So
you bought it on Thursday, you had a police raid on Saturday.
But what we did in between Thursday and Saturday is it's a story I've told. This is the thing that, gets me invited out to dinner and stuff like that. But so between Thursday and Saturday night, we We went down to Industrial Boulevard and we bought 50 gallons of axle grease, black axle grease. Mm-hmm. And we greased the entire fence on the property. So
everybody tried to run, they're just slipping off.
so on Friday, I think it was, we greased the entire fence, and we had problems with people going back and forth, squeezing through the fence, you know, going back and forth between the neighboring apartment complexes and stuff. So this black axle grease not only would identify people that had snuck through the fence, it also made the fence look fantastic. There's a tip for your apartment owners.
Well, it sounds like you get a 3 thing, because it's like you're going to identify the people breaking in. It's going to be difficult for people to run away because they're going to slip all over the place.
Yeah.
And the third thing, it looks fantastic.
Looks fantastic. I think
who thought of that?
That's a win. I don't know. I don't take credit for it.
Okay.
So, but you know, my property management company at the time was really what made that work, and that's what I think about when I think about doing deals and stuff. It's just the people around you really are the ones that make it work.
So not only look at the numbers, look at the due diligence and the staff that are going to make those numbers work.
Yeah, and you know, you can have a very nice apartment complex that's poorly run, that is a disaster. You can have a great asset, you know, something that's totally fixed up and great, but poorly run, and it's going to be a disaster. You can have a piece of junk that's properly managed and make a home run.
Right.
And when you combine those two, you have something that's nice, that's properly managed. That's when you make really the big bucks. So on that particular apartment complex, I know Will Crozier was on here, but I bought that about the same time that they bought their 77 units. So I bought 63 and they bought 77, and we were kind of, you know, comparing notes and competing a little bit, I guess. And my experience was very similar to his. So I owned it for 18 months. Well, this is pretty cool too, though. So during the police raid, so it took about a month to get everybody out that needed to go. We took the occupancy from 70% when we bought it down to 17%.
But that's probably a good 54 or 56, whatever the number is, to get them out. That's probably good.
Yeah. So those are the people that needed to leave. And at the end of a month, really 1 month, we did two police raids.
2?
In a course of a month. And at the end of that month, there wasn't anybody that had a parking ticket there.
Nice.
I mean, it had just completely quieted down, and like people weren't hanging around. They weren't, you know, like.
Well, nobody would want to be. I mean, if you're scared of the police, you probably don't want to be anywhere where there's already been 2 police raids under new management within a month.
People aren't willing to fight you to stay someplace. I mean, they know what the program is. I mean, they move on and find somebody else that's weak, really, and move into their place. So, so we took 1 month to get everybody out. We took 1 month to rehab it. We brought in everybody.
Just in a quick
everybody that we could find. I mean, AC, parking lot, new fence on the back, new roofs.
Now, is all that through the
interiors.
management company, or is that through you just assuming that that needed to be done? Or who was advising you on what needed to be done?
We organized it with a couple different people. So I hired Brian Amos. Brian Amos does a lot of due diligence work, and he's an engineer. And I don't know what a roof. I don't know how many layers go on, and I don't know how many nails.
You just need there needs to be a roof.
I mean, there needs to be a roof, and somebody needs to put it on. But I don't really get involved in the daily, like, you know, the nitty gritty. It's just not who I am. And so I hire Brian, and Brian hires a contractor. So we've got an engineer, we've got a contractor, we've got the asset managers, and they're all kind of working with each other, making sure everybody else is doing what they need to do. And it took us 1 month, and we turned, how many units? We turned 50 units in a month. New floors, you know.
Which isn't, I mean, the magnitude of that is so cool, because you got to think about it. Like, sometimes us doing single family, it's like, oh, this is going to be a 2 month project. And it's like 2 months on 2,000 square foot versus how many doors are we talking
Yeah,
again?
it was 50 doors.
50 doors in a month's time. That's
in
a
1 month.
lot of speed, a lot of work.
Yeah. So I was willing to spend a lot of money just to get everybody out there at one time. And the beauty of it was not occupied. I mean,
Right.
that's a benefit. That's not a hindrance. That's a benefit, was just not having the people there.
Yeah, because you can just get in there. You can get 3 to 5 different contractors in the same door at the same time.
Exactly. So 1 month to kick everybody out, 1 month to fix it up. 1 month later, we were at 97%. So 3 months.
But not only that, were your rental rates much higher than when you
Not
bought
really,
it?
not
Oh,
really.
you kept it the same?
Not really. I kept it about the same. My goal was it's called a stabilized asset, and I wasn't trying to squeeze every dime out of it. What I was trying to do was get it to look attractive for the bank. So it needs to be in the 90s, and it needs to stay there for 6 months in order for a bank to come back and look at it and go, okay, this thing's turned around. You know, it's got a history of revenue. We'll lend against it.
Right.
Because up to that point, there was no history of revenue, so a bank wouldn't lend against it. They did. I take that back a little bit. But so we paid $600,000 cash. We took that asset to the bank, and we put it up as collateral, and then we borrowed back $300,000 for the rehab. So $600,000 for the acquisition, $300,000 for the rehab. We sold it 18 months later for $1.5 million. And we took $10,000 a month for 16 months. So $160,000 in revenue.
That's a good return.
Dropping off the bottom. So it was 138% in 18 months.
That's a good return. I mean, and you got you got the experience. You got to go through and actually learn that you could do it. I'm sure you had a lot of fun with it. You've got a great story with the axle grease, and you made a nice return on that.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you were still doing other stuff during that process too.
Well, I was. And, at the exact same time that I bought the 61 units in April of 2011. In March of 2011, so all within 2 months of each other, I bought a package of 44 houses. So I paid $37,000 a house for 44 houses.
Now, were you still doing that 10,000 down, or how'd you get the financing?
No,
for
this
that?
was a little bit different. So I went to the bank. So I developed some banking relationships.
Because again, you weren't, if we go all the way back to earlier, you don't have a problem for asking for big money.
Yeah, some things had changed in my life as well. When I started the process of buying the 14 houses, I really didn't have any money. But my father passed away, and I got some money, but I really knew what to do with it now. I mean, I'm very thankful that this process happened like it did, because when I did get some money, I knew what to do.
You knew how to utilize it to
Yeah,
to
I knew
better
how
your
to
game.
I knew how to make this work. And so we ended up buying 44 houses, and we bought a 61 unit apartment complex. Me and my brother were business partners. And it was kind of like, well, let's see what does better. We can do this, we can do that, or, And the apartment complex was, well, I don't know.
Where's your love? Houses or apartments?
I don't know. I think apartments. I mean, you just have to give it up for the apartments. They're just so much easier. It's just one.
Well, you got to think you've
one
got
location.
If you have 14 plus the 44, that's 58 doors versus your 61 units in one acquisition.
Yeah.
Granted, this might be cool. I've got this many houses, but that's that many problems. With the apartments, it's like you have a problem. Over here, you've got potentially, 58 or 60 problems over here.
Yeah, buying 44 houses at one time was difficult. I thought, I'll just buy them. They're all leased. And whenever somebody leaves, I'll just have a rehab. I'll have this constant stream of rehabs that I can do over the next 5 years. A couple will come due, a couple people will leave. I'll fix them up and either re-rent them or sell them or whatever. And, I bought it, and then a month later, I find out that a third of the people aren't going to pay rent.
And you had to go through a third, all those.
So I had 15 houses all of a sudden in 1 month that I've got to get rehabbed.
Right.
And cash flow goes way down and everything. So I hired Blake. I hired 5 different contractors. I had 5 different contractors working on 3 houses apiece, which was chaos.
Right.
And bookkeeping was just a nightmare. I mean,
And you're still working a full-time job at this time?
that's when I quit.
Okay. Well, you're like, either I got to keep working or I need to turn this into a full-scale business.
So I quit the month before I bought the 61 units.
Okay.
So that's when I go, I've found a place. I know what I'm going to do. It's time for me to move on.
Right. So other than the axle grease, let's bring some humor here. Because I'm sure with that many properties that quickly, you probably come across some stuff that just makes you go, scratch your head and go, what the hell did I just see?
Well, yeah, there's lots of funny stories that we've got. I mean, one lady, she had been there through that whole process. She made it through the purge, she made it through the rehab, and she made it through the lease up. And, you know, and I'm walking across the parking lot one day. She comes running over and she said, "Oh my God," she goes, "this place used to smell like marijuana." And she goes, "Now it smells like Fabuloso." And
for those of us who are not familiar with Fabuloso, what is that?
Ryan doesn't know what
I
Fabuloso
didn't,
is,
no.
but Fabuloso is a purple cleaner that has a very distinct smell that is primarily used in the Hispanic community to clean stuff. And
So primarily purchase it like Fiesta?
Fiesta. Yeah, you'd buy that in Fiesta and stuff like that. But it has a very particular smell.
Which is probably still better than marijuana smell.
We were laughing
Well,
about
for
it. I mean, it was,
most of us.
It was funny. It was a funny thing to hear. You know, another thing, during the due diligence, we were going into each unit that we had, and I was with Brian Amos and the team asset management, and we were doing our inspections on each one of these. And, you know, we knocked on the door, there's nobody there. We go in, there's 5 or 6 guys that are doing this walkthrough of each one. And I'm kind of standing out in front of the apartment door, you know, just sitting there waiting for them to get through inside. They're going to go through and inspect and make sure, you know, how's the stove, how's the dishwasher, stuff like that. And all of a sudden, this Jaguar pulls into the parking lot, pulls up right to the parking spot near this apartment. This guy gets out. He's probably 6'4", looks like Shaft. The movie Shaft, right?
Right.
6, big guy, fur coat on. He gets out of his Jaguar with his fur coat on, walks directly towards us, and we are in his apartment.
Oh, Lord.
And I hadn't had a lot of experience previously with like going into apartments, you know. And, you know, this guy walks up, just cool as a cucumber. "Hey, what's going on?" You know, there's 7 people inside of his apartment, and just walks over to the refrigerator, pulls it up, and grabs a bowl of spaghetti and starts eating. And I was like, wow, that didn't go.
It's like, A, he's got a Jaguar. B, he's got a giant fur coat. C, he's going to walk in and not even care that there's 7 people. And he just pulls out a bowl of spaghetti and just sits down and starts eating.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's funny.
So
Well,
that guy was pretty cool.
hey, if you're enjoying this, you know, please give us a like, please give us a share. If you have any questions or comments or want to join the conversation, one of the things here at Propelio is we really enjoy people to interact with us. That's why we do the Facebook live streams. That way you could join in. Here in a second, I know Daniel's over here. He's got a question from one of the community. So what we got?
I've got a question here from Richard, who's asking, when you're buying apartment complexes, are you sourcing equity or how are you doing it? What's going on there?
Well, kind of my experience was, and I talked about the history of the land acquisitions that I did. I was leaving something that other people were trying to go towards. So I had, at the previous company, I had 375 limited partners that represented $500 million in equity, and I was exhausted. I was trying to keep everybody informed, keep everybody up to date, manage their expectations on land when you never know when it's going to sell and when it's not going to sell, and you know, and that's what I was leaving. So what I decided when I left was to own all of a very small piece. Well, not very small, but you know, I don't mean to minimize it or anything like that, but own all of what I buy, as opposed to being, how I described earlier, the back seat of a car that's driven by somebody else. So I don't have limited partners. Me and my brother are partners, but other than that, I don't.
But that's family.
Yeah, other than that, I don't have limited partners. Certainly could have, but it just, you know, and you had Will on. Will and I were the same trajectory. His trajectory was with limited partners. My trajectory was owning everything. I'm not sure which way is better, but he's done awfully well for himself, and I guess I could have gone that way.
But I mean, it's also a lifestyle, because I know with Will, I know he likes race cars, and you like big old trucks and dogs.
Yeah.
So it's just a lifestyle choice.
Well, one of the things that talking about, kind of the why and all this sort of thing is that when I first started going, well, if I own 20 houses and I don't have to go to work, then that frees up time to go do some cool stuff. So that's really what I want to do. And one of the big things that I had was traveling with my family. And I just wanted to go for an extended period of time, to not have my name on a business card, of like, I need to manage this. And so my industrial space, I've got an industrial manager. My multifamily apartments, I've got a multifamily manager. My single family houses, I've got a property manager there. I also have a lot of seller finance, and that's a whole nother section of what we could talk about. But I've got a whole bunch of seller finance, and they're managed by August REI. They collect the checks, they pay the taxes, and they make sure the insurance is paid and all that other kind of stuff. So I have probably 5 different businesses that I don't have.
It's all about, we talk about here all the time, it's all about your team, and make sure you have a good team in place. Daniel, do we got another question?
I've got a couple of statements. A lot of people, I think, are just in awe of the story and what had happened and how fast it progressed. I got Damian Leonard on here. You may know him.
Yeah.
He was saying, I'd much rather have 60 doors under one title than 60 titles under 60 different doors, kind of mentioning that. I've got a bunch of people in here just saying, good job, awesome, loving it. One of the things I'd like to ask is, what would you say the pros and cons of equity versus no equity would be, like as far as equity partners and sourcing all that?
Well, one of the things the big thing that I've found is that if you do have limited partners, your limited partners, and I experienced this from the land deals as well, is that if a limited partner invests in your partnership, on their balance statement, they're just going to have a $100,000 investment in a limited partnership. It doesn't really benefit them that much. It's like a stock. Like, I have $100,000 worth of stock and it's worth $100,000. When you do it on your own and you don't have limited partners, and you can buy something for 40, have it reappraised for 100, and all of a sudden your net worth has gone up by $60,000.
And then you can also leverage that asset for
And then
whatever.
then you go back to the bank, and the bank likes you better. And that's what I found with the single family houses, was that I bought one house and the bank liked me. I bought 5 houses and the bank liked me more. And it's a weird thing you got to get your head around. It's like, the more I buy, the more they like me.
Right.
Because everything leading up to that point has been the exact opposite. I buy a car, I buy a house for myself, I buy some toys, whatever it is, it decreases your net worth.
It's almost like a casino, because if you're a high roller gambler person, you go over there and you lose a lot of money. Casino's like, cool, thanks. But you make a lot of money and you're earning a lot of money, they treat you like a rock star because they want you to continue coming in,
Yeah.
so they can eventually take your money back.
Right.
Their money back.
That's one of the big things also, is that that I always promote, is just relationships with banks, because ultimately my job has become more of a financial, it's just the loans and making sure that the loans are not going to mature when they're not able to refinance them. That's the risk that I've seen in my lifetime, has been when loans come due and the credit markets are not good. That's when you get bargains. And I've experienced that myself from other people. And so I spend a lot of time on loan maturities and making sure that they're extended and making sure that I don't run into a brick wall. So, yeah.
So, just as we're wrapping up here, so and that therefore we are wrapping up. So,
What?
If you, well, we can keep going. I don't care.
Jesus, I'm only like
you're like I'm in it. Let's do it.
I'm only
if you
like
have-
a
if you
quarter
have-
of my way in.
Well, that's why we got to get you back.
Okay.
If you have questions, more comments, jump them in the comment section. As far as advice to whether they be brand new people, whether they be intermediates, like what is some advice to give to an investor out there to raise their game or to maybe hack it or do it better?
Well, doing things, the first house that you buy, it just changes you as a person. Mm-hmm. It completely changes you. I bought the crappy little house in Cedar Hill, and I got $300, $400 a month from it, and my experience was like, wow, this wasn't bad. I mean, how many more times can I do this?
Right.
Divided how much I had by the cost of the houses, and ultimately the $10,000 was overstated. At the time, I could buy a house and I could refinance it out, and they would give me everything back that I had in it. How many times can you do that? Mm-hmm. I mean, just the expanse of like possibilities was just bam.
Right.
And I mean, I like, was just in awe. I was like, it's kind of a matrix kind of thing of like, I could do anything. I mean, if I had enough of these things and it doesn't cost me anything to do them, it costs me some time and stuff, I could do literally anything I want.
Right.
Just do it enough times and, the whole world becomes, your oyster.
Well, and on that, circle all the way back to, let's just have enough time to spend time with your family or have a drink or have a beer with your bud. One of my favorite aspects to you and what you've done is you don't really need an office, you don't really want an office, but you're like, hey, it'd be a nice place to get away from the family when you need to for work. And you buy a house in the ghetto and you make it into an office.
It's a ghetto that's right next to the $1 million house.
Well, right. Yeah.
Not very far, but anyway, yeah.
But you knew it was eventually going to be a transition. You
Transitional
bought it,
neighborhood.
It was a transitional neighborhood. You got a good deal, and you purposely made it into an office park, but the backyard is now what?
It's called the Tijuana Beer Garden. So we got a backyard that has Sotillo tile and, it's like looks like the Alamo. So we've got a big masonry fence around it, and we have our workers come over. We use a discada. Discada is like a Mexican wok. We cook fajitas out there and have beer and bring our workers over on Friday afternoons and
just have a beer and
turn on some mariachi music.
I just love the idea that y'all literally you have your offices in the house, and the backyard is basically an outdoor barbecue pit, bar. Lit up, fire pit, and just fun.
Yeah, we had a fantastic Conor McGregor, the fight. So we probably had 90 people over there.
Awesome.
Cooked out and had a big screen in the backyard. Those are just the fun stuff that you get to do. I mean, but back to the lifestyle thing. The thing that I wanted to do was I wanted to go with my family, and I wanted to go for a month at a time. I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go. Oh, there's the Eiffel Tower. Oh, there's this. Let's wrap it up and go back to Dallas. I wanted to go somewhere for a month, shop at local grocery stores.
Introduce your kids to
where do we want to go?
everything.
Where do we want to go today? What do we want to do today? So we started in Alabama. So just to see if I could actually accomplish that was like to be able to be away for a month.
It goes back to that proof of concept.
Yeah, proof of concept. So we went to Alabama. We didn't go outside the United States. We could get back if I had to. If something really blew up, I could get back. But so we did that the first year. We went to Spain for a month. We drove 2,500 kilometers around Spain in a 12-seater van, and we had one reservation. So we had 3 days of reservations in Madrid the day that we got there. The rest of the time, we just went on VRBO and decided which direction we were going to go. We're going to go left here, or we're going to go right. My wife is, I had to drag her along on this one because she was not so sure about this whole thing. But we ended up with a house on the Mediterranean with wine casks and a pool and a 16-person dining room table for $100 a night.
But the whole point is, that's the lifestyle choice. That's what y'all wanted to do.
Yeah.
That's what you want to introduce your kids to.
So we went for a month to Spain. We went for a month to Costa Rica. I've got my Costa Rica shirt on. This is Fernando Batista's ranch in Costa Rica.
And I would give a shout out to Fernando as far as if you ever want to do work and work with him. But he's always in Cuba or Costa Rica. He's like, every time I want to sim and deal, he's never in town.
Yeah,
He travels.
hey,
That's the real estate. That's
why I love being around him. I mean,
Exactly.
we have a good time. So we had a time in Costa Rica with my whole family. We rode horses on his ranch up to the top of this mountain. And there's a tree right at the very pinnacle of it. And you look out and there's 3 volcanoes on the horizon. And they had this giant tree and it's called Mandarina Limon. And it's a lime that's the size of a grapefruit that looks like an orange. So it's orange in color. It's the size of a grapefruit, but it tastes like a lime. So we had the machetes on the horse. And we pulled the machetes off. We cut off a big grapefruit-looking thing, slice it in half, squeeze out the inside, and fill it up with tequila. So we filled this big, almost grapefruit-sized thing up with tequila and just drank tequila sitting on this mountain in Costa Rica. And so my family went for a month. So we went for a month to Costa Rica. We went surfing and we went all over the place. And last year we went to Australia.
Wow.
So we went to Australia for a month and we got an RV. Same thing. We didn't know where we were going. I didn't have any plans. We arrived in Sydney and decided to drive up the Great Barrier Reef. And so we spent a month in an RV.
All because of real estate.
Well, it has to do with the way that I set things up. I mean, from the very beginning, this was a business. I didn't want to be the integral part of this business.
You didn't want to be a landlord.
I didn't want to be needed, really.
Right.
I don't have an ego in that respect.
You want to be the bank almost.
I want to be the guy that nobody knows.
Yeah,
like kind of the background. Just
On that note, what's funny is earlier I was like, hey, is there anything you want to pitch or sell or anything like that, or how can we, maybe our user base to possibly help you out? He's like, no, just hanging out.
yeah.
That's what we like here.
I mean, that's kind of the place is that I don't really have anything to sell.
Right.
I'm not really trying to raise money.
No.
Not
hanging
really
out.
trying to.
You're like, why are you doing this? Maybe it's because you had my cell phone.
Yeah. So
Sweet.
So I know Ryan from back in the day, and been watching you come along.
Well, appreciate it, man. Yeah,
do
it's
your own
been fun.
thing
Yeah.
and like spread your wings. and
One day I'll be a mini Mac. Mini Mac.
I love it.
If we could all be mini Macs, hashtag something. Big Mac, little Mac. Well, hopefully we can afford better than a Big Mac. But any parting comments, or Daniel, do you have any thoughts or ideas? Or
I think most people are just amazed at what you've done.
yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, we haven't really even gotten into
I
it.
know. We'll have to get you back.
Well, I've got a 176 unit apartment complex
Okay.
now. So I sold the 61 and bought 176. I bought a 32 unit apartment complex that I just sold. And I ultimately ended up buying 100 houses. Mm-hmm. So I bought the 44 at one time, got up to about 100 houses. Now I've got 48 seller finance.
So what's your portfolio at the moment?
Well, 48 seller finance houses, 30 rental houses, 176 unit apartment complex, and an industrial space down in Deep Ellum.
And what does Will have? I'm just kidding. I'm kidding.
Oh, Will's way ahead of me. I mean, yeah, way ahead of me.
So that competition ended right off the bat.
Yeah, no, I couldn't keep
You're
up.
like,
I mean,
I'm not.
I wasn't raising money, so you
Yeah.
know, I do have some advantages of, hey, it's all mine at least.
Right,
so
right.
I don't have to, and you were asking about raising money and all that kind of stuff. What I have now is that I can decide to sell the apartment complex if I want to sell it. Mm-hmm. I don't have to talk to anybody. I don't have to discuss whether it's the right time to sell it, whether it's a bad time to sell it.
You don't have to have a meeting with minutes to discuss and the pros and cons, and then you have to have let's vote up, vote down. It's just, I want to or I don't want to.
Yeah, and it gives me a little bit more flexibility than a lot of people of like, yeah, hey, don't need to sell it.
And are you still doing most of your deals with your brother, or was it just that one apartment?
No, we still do most of the deals together.
Okay.
You know,
Keep it in the family.
One other thing that I kind of almost forgot about, but I do have a limited partner. I do have a business partner now, and we bought hair salons. So they're not technically hair salons.
I just want to say, define irony.
Yeah. Well, people say that all the time. They go like, it's funny that you own hair salons
yeah.
because, for obvious reasons. And I said, here's my retort. I own apartments too. I don't live in a fucking apartment.
Yeah.
So anyway, we ended up buying 3 of these salon suites is what they're called. They're 50 units. They're individually leased out to people who cut hair and massages and stuff like that. So we've got one in Plano, we've got one in Allen, we've got one in Frisco, and Tim Hammock's my business partner on it, and it's just going great, man. We raised revenues in one location by $60,000 last year, and it's just a great business.
Yeah. Well, and one thing we always preach in here is just be creative. Like whether you're dealing with negotiating with a single family or just in real estate in general, just be creative. Because the world is your oyster. Rah rah, moto. But
yeah, I try and be like Bruce Lee, like water. Just flow where
the money is.
Flow where it can make a deal.
I love that though. I own a fucking apartment. I don't live there either. I love that. That's right. I'm gonna put that on loop on that's gonna be a meme by the end of the day.
Yeah.
Well, hey, anything else? High five. We're out. Well, hey, thanks again for coming in and doing this. I know you had literally no other reason, just to sure, I'll do it.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool that you came in. So as we're wrapping up, please give us some likes. Please give us some shares. Thanks again for watching. If you check this out, and we do this every single day, Monday through Friday. So, but anyways, we'll see you next time. Again, thank you so much for watching.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming in.